Hi everyone and welcome to In Deep Geek Live. Today, actually, hang on a moment, I just realized you can see all of my background. I forgot to put the green screen up, not to worry. Today we are looking at the Rings of Power. And what I thought I would do was go through the recent trailer and answer the question that I've had for quite some time, that I think quite a few of us have had for quite some time, which is pretty fundamental. What is this show about? Yes, we know this is set in the world of Tolkien's Legendarium. We know this is back in the Second Age. We know this is this is thousands of years before the events of the Lord of the Rings. But what stories are they trying to tell? Who are these characters? What can we actually expect from this show? So that's what I want to do with this live stream. I'm going to use the images we got from the last trailer, and I'm going to go through them and try and tell, as best as I understand it, what this story is. What is it that we're actually looking at here? What can we expect from the Rings of Power? So that's what I'm going to be doing for the first half hour or so. It's just going to be me largely talking through the trailer and trying not to do it in the order that the trailer gave us these images, but in the order that we can expect to see them on the show, the order that makes sense, the order of the story, the characters. What is it that we can get from this? So, as always, I will be shaping the rest of this live stream around questions I've got from my patrons. I will try and pick up as many questions as I can from the chat as we're going through. But I thought, just as a fundamental, what is it? I think people want to know what it is that we're going to be expecting. So let me see whether I can get this bit of technology to work. There we go. This is the starting point for the trailer. We have Galadriel. She's putting a helmet on what will be a hill of helmets. But this shows us, I think, that we're starting here. We've been told already we're starting here not in the Second Age. We're going to get, whether it's going to be flashbacks, whether it's going to be a full amount of sort of info dump history, we're not entirely sure yet, but we're going to be told a lot of the history of Middle-earth. We're going to be shown all the way back. If you remember the first ever image we got from the Rings of Power, that was the image we had, the two trees of Valinor in the background. We have the Undying Lands, where the world is good and perfect and right and undying. That is where Galadriel herself was born, and we saw a picture. There was a character in the foreground who we think, we don't know, we don't have confirmation, but we think was probably Finrod, her brother, who we'll come back to in just one moment. This was good. Then at San Diego Comic-Con, which was last weekend, we had another image that I can't actually show here because they give copyright strikes bizarrely to people who show this image. Everyone will be able to see it, I'm sure, very soon. But the two trees of Valinor with a shadow coming over them. The shadow of Morgoth. Morgoth is the big baddie of this, the big baddie of the First Age and earlier in Middle-earth. And he, together with Ungoliant, destroyed the two trees. Now, why is this important? Why does this play into the Second Age of Middle-earth? Because it sets up the First Age. Now, what we have here, this is a snapshot picture from the trailer. The camera kind of pans around. We see a few of these characters. This looks to me, it might not be, but it looks to me like the Sons of Feanor. Feanor is one of the central characters in Tolkien's Legendarium. He was the leader of the Noldorin elves, the Noldor. And he was the person who led them from Valinor after the two trees had been destroyed. He led them from Valinor back into Middle-earth. The people who came with him, the Noldor nation, included people like Galadriel. But his sons swore an oath to get back the Silmarils. This is where the Silmarillion comes from, because the First Age was all about the Silmarils. And these guys here, the Sons of Feanor, spent the entire First Age trying desperately to get these Silmarils back. Eventually they failed. But the upshot of all of this was at the end of the First Age, we have the War of Wrath. Valinor comes in. Finally, eventually, Morgoth is defeated. But what we have is lots and lots of battle and war and death and tragedy. The First Age is heavy. The First Age is really, really bad. So that's what we've got here. We've got Galadriel. This is probably, as I say, some sort of flashback, some sort of image back to the First Age. This could be any one of a number of different battles in the First Age. Lots and lots of elves died. And one of the elves who died in the First Age is this guy, who we think is Finrod. This was Galadriel's elder brother. He is one of the central characters in the First Age. Galadriel actually wasn't that central in the First Age. She was there, she was doing stuff, but she wasn't driving as much of the action as we see later on. Finrod was. He was the guy who built up relations between men, humanity, and the elves. He fought in battles here. We see him fighting in a battle, and he died in the First Age. He died at the hands of Sauron. And what we have here, this looks like him dead and Galadriel leaning over him. Now, if you look closely at this image, if you look at his arm, you will see some scratch marks. Now, I hope this means that they're sticking to the canon, which is that he died at the hands of a werewolf, effectively. Sauron, at the time, he was shape-shifting all the time. He was the Lord of the Wolves. And Finrod died as part of this great story of Beren and Luthien, one of the great stories of the First Age. But he's dead, and the person responsible is Sauron. This is important because, as we will see, here's a close-up here of Galadriel, see a tear going down. This impacted on her. She has a personal grudge against Sauron because of what Sauron was doing in the First Age. Sauron in the First Age was the chief lieutenant to Morgoth, the big baddie. So what happened at the end of the First Age? Yes, the good guys won. The Valar, the host of Valinor, came in and destroyed the forces of the evil one. However, it wasn't 100%. Some escaped, and all of these things we will pick up on in just a few moments. Some orcs escaped. Some slipped through the net. Okay, orcs are not that big or powerful, but some of them did escape to survive to the next age. A Balrog did. We know which Balrog that. This is Durin's Bane, who we see again in the Third Age. This is the Balrog which faces off against Gandalf. He basically went and hid himself in the depths of the earth after the First Age. So one of them survived. Some dragons survived. We're probably not going to see much by way of dragons in the Rings of Power, but some dragons survived. They went off to the northeast, and Smaug is the descendant of them. And crucially, one other person survived, Sauron. Morgoth, the big baddie, was chained down. But Sauron managed to evade capture. First, he seems to have, perhaps it was true, perhaps it was just him trying to play a game, but he did try to sort of persuade people that maybe, he was going to sort of say sorry and give up, but then he just slunk away and hid. And for the first 1,000 years-ish of the Second Age, he is gone. He's disappeared. No one knows where he is. So that is the setup for the Second Age show that we have. Galadriel, who we see here, is almost certainly going to be our entry point because we know a bit about her, it makes it quite an easy entry point. She also has this personal grudge against Sauron. And what seems to be happening in this show, as the show opens in the Second Age, is that she is still carrying on this grudge against Sauron. She's hunting for him. She's hunting for whatever may be left, the dregs of Morgoth's army. That's what she's doing. So we get these images. This comes very probably following on from, if you remember, the early images we got of her just like climbing up that sort of iced up waterfall with like the dagger and things like that, fighting the ice troll. That is all part of this sequence as far as we can tell. Going into whatever this is, this looks like they hunted down some old stronghold of Morgoth or Sauron or something like that. I think this looks like it from the outside. The coloring seems quite similar between these, so I think this is what this is that they found some old stronghold and they're looking for clues. Where might Sauron be? Sauron just disappeared. Is he hiding somewhere? What's going on? Here she's got some elves with her. They're going off looking for stuff. They're about to fight this ice troll, this snow troll, and this, we will come back to this a few more times, I'm sure. This is the symbol here in this show of Sauron, and they discover this. Sauron is here or has been here, or someone who wishes to leave his symbol has been here. She's hunting for him. That's where we enter this show. But in the bigger picture of the beginning of the Second Age, what we have is a peaceful land. Morgoth was defeated. The forces of good and happiness and light and life have managed to prosper. When I was at that London event, whenever that was, the question that I was putting to the showrunners, that the agenda I came to this with, was what's going on with this time contraction? What impact is that going to have on this show? And this seems to be the answer, or at least this was what they said to me. The first 1,000 years or so of the Second Age, if you're a Tolkien nerd, then you can go back to what happened there. Broadly speaking, yes, there are going to be some changes. Yes, there's going to be a few differences here and there. Broadly speaking, the first 1,000 years are the same. So for 1,000 years, and that's the background to this show, that's happened in the past. When we come in, it's somewhere around effectively the year 1000. I suspect they will actually fudge the timelines, and so we're probably not told this is year 1000 of the Second Age. But roughly speaking, civilizations have been able to grow. Lindon, which is what we see here, this is the elf capital, really, towards the west of what we think of as the map of Middle-earth. This is at its height. They established it basically after the War of Roth at the beginning of the Second Age, and then it grew and it prospered. Gil-galad, who we will see in a little bit, he is the king, the high king of the elves of the west, and everything is good, everything is peaceful. And we will see other nations, we'll come to them in just a moment, we'll see other nations, other peoples also having times of peace. The dwarves in Khazad-dûm also having some kind of time of peace and prosperity. Humans, they've settled, they're growing in numbers, they seem to be doing well. And Numenor, this great civilization, is reaching its height. So everything seems to be going well. And in that we get, if you remember back to, I think it was the previous but one teaser trailer. Amazon, if you're watching this, so many teaser trailers. It's really hard to keep up. But in that we got a conversation between Elrond and Galadriel. And And Elrond was saying, you fought the good fight, basically. You've done it. You've done good. Yes, you've been hunting down all of these agents of Sauron. You can now rest. we're now at peace. Everything is okay again. And Galadriel's there and saying, you have not seen what I have seen. And he's like, I have seen things. And she said, no, you have not seen what I have seen. And that is going to be one of the tensions that we're going to see in the first couple of episodes. We're still talking here about the first couple of episodes. That is going to be one of the key things that we see in the first couple of episodes here. Galadriel sees a danger out there. Others, they might think there is still a little bit of lingering evil, but they've moved on beyond this. They now see there's hope, there's opportunity. Let's move on. So Galadriel, it would appear, is persuaded that, okay, her time is gone. She may well know, we saw her crying there over Finrod. Finrod, as an elf, his immortal soul is tied to Middle-earth, to Adar. So, yes, he has died here on Middle-earth, but he has gone to the halls of Mandos, and he will return. Galadriel has family back in Valinor. There are reasons, there are things pulling her back. And she seems to accept this. As far as we can tell, she seems to accept this. And this seems to be some kind of elven ceremony. If you look here, there's like placing these kind of like golden laurels on people's heads. Now is the time for you to go to Valinor. Well done. You've been victorious here. That kind of thing. This the character placing it on her head, incidentally, you can't see it very well there, but that does seem to be Gil-galad doing that. So he's the boss man here. And what we have also, this is not very clear, but this appears to be a sail and making a ship for Galadriel and some others to be heading west. So that is where we'll leave her for a moment. We'll come back to her character in a bit, but that is the opening sequence, really, of the Rings of Power as far as Galadriel is concerned. She's been hunting down. She's got this grudge against Sauron. She's been hunting down him and all of the remnants of the forces of evil. And finally, although maybe she doesn't believe it in her heart, finally she accepts the need to head west. So, this, I should probably just say, we've been told this is an important image. I think probably thematically important rather than anything else. These are elven children. If you zoom in and look at their ears, that appears to be a paper boat floating down a river. So this is probably some kind of imagery about elven children understand they have to be heading west. This isn't their eternal home here in Middle-earth. And this is Elrond. He seems to have arrived back. Perhaps this is him observing that ceremony. It's not 100% clear, but he's been out and about, and now he's back, and he's looking reasonably content there. But we know, as Galadriel suspected, that all is not perfect in Middle-earth. All is not exactly right and good. There are some things. Evil is lurking. The Harfoots, who are this proto-hobbit community, they are, and just to sort of pick up a few of the early critiques here of the Rings of Power, no, Tolkien doesn't give a detailed history of hobbits before the Third Age, but he does say they descended from humans. He does say that they've been around since, I think he says in the introduction to the Lord of the Rings, that they've been around since the Elder Days, or the descendants were. So there were proto-hobbits around. These are the Harfoots. They, as far as we can understand, are not going to be central to the plot. At least we hope they're not going to be central to the plot, in as much as they're going to be slightly behind the scenes. They're not the people who the history book remembers. They're trying to stay back. One of the things that the showrunners have said, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, is a great play. It's a slightly obscure reference, but For those who've ever seen it or read it, it makes a huge amount of sense. This is Hamlet, but Hamlet told from the perspective of a few people slightly off camera. And the title of that play comes from, and it was a great play, comes from an almost throwaway line in Hamlet, which is Hamlet goes off with his friends and then he comes back, and at some point later we just get this throwaway line, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and that's it. But who are they? What was their story? And that play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, was about Hamlet from their perspective. What did they see? They weren't in the center of the plot, but they were the spearmen off to the side. They were the people's slightly hearing the rumors about what was going on. Maybe they were interacting with the main characters, but the main characters didn't really pay much attention to them. That is the feel we've got going on here with the Harfoots, it would appear. They're there. They will observe a lot. They will see a lot. Maybe they will occasionally interact with the main plot, but they're not the grand protagonists of this. So that's what's going on here. But they are in tune with nature. They are in tune with Middle-earth. And so when they say the skies are strange, we understand there's something going wrong here that maybe we don't know. And clearly the big thing, we've been shown this from various angles, is this comet, the red comet, which is hurtling through the sky. And we see it. One of the previous trailers showed that pretty much everyone sees it. We have a lot of shots of people gazing moodily up into the sky, observing the red comet and thinking, oh, that seems ominous. What's going on there? This, incidentally, this appears to be Bronwyn and Arondir, characters that we'll come across in just one moment, but lots of people see this. Is this a portent of evil? In practical terms, it crashes into the ground. This is an image of it smashing into the ground, and out of it comes the stranger. The stranger appears to be a human male, an older human male, who doesn't really know his history. He doesn't really understand what's going on. But Norrie here, who's one of the Harfoots, she rescues him from it and helps him out. And so his story is going to be one of the key mysteries that we've got in this. This will be slightly separate for the first half of, at least, of season 1, slightly separate from what is going on in the wider plot. But still, one of the big mysteries is going to be, who is this guy? Who is Meteor Man? Who is this person who came out from a meteor from the sky? Clearly not a normal human, clearly not a normal elf. So who is it? It has to be someone special, but at the moment they don't appear very special. So it's one of the key mysteries that we've got shaping up here. There's been a lot of speculation about this, so I'm not going to go into all of the detail, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but let's just say that this person is clearly not just a nobody. This is clearly an important character in this story. But I said I would talk about Bronwyn and Arondir. This is them. So Bronwyn appears to be a herbalist, a human herbalist in a village, we're told, in Tir Harad. Now, we don't know exactly where Tir Harad is, but it seems to be, we get near and far Harad, Tolkien talks about in the Third Age, close to Mordor, what we think of as Mordor in these days, sort of the south and east of the map. And what we've been told by a few of the actors is that there's a backstory here, is that, as was true in Tolkien stories, the humans in those areas seem to have supported Morgoth back in the First Age. And as Morgoth was defeated, but the humans survived. Now, what happens after that? Well, the elves don't now trust those humans, understandably. And so they appear to be sort of, if not their overlords then keeping an eye on them. These humans off to the south and east. That's not where the elves are mainly based, but the elves are keeping an eye on them. Adar here seems to be one of those elves keeping an eye on the humans, and the two of them seem to have got into a relationship. Here she seems to be doing some kind of rallying cry for the people of her village. Somebody's holding up a sword. We'll see that sword again in a little bit, but clearly something's going on away from the main action, off in far bits of Middle-earth. The elves are there and are vaguely aware. They're keeping an oversight, but this isn't the center of the action. What is it that they're concerned about? Well, orcs seems to be the answer. We know that orcs survived. We know that some of them, at the end of the first age, they kind of like went off into different parts and they sort of survived in dribs and drabs. Later, obviously, Sauron manages to turn them into some kind of massive army, but for now, it's just dribs and drabs of orcs. And they seem to be surviving in undercover, hidden away far off in the south and east. Here they've got hoods on. They appear to be in some kind of like walkway where they've put sort of cloths and things above it to keep the sunlight away. Orcs don't like the sunlight, so they're protecting themselves from the sunlight, and they appear to be gathering under the leadership of this guy. Now, this guy is a character called Adar. Again, I should probably clarify, none of this is my inside knowledge. All of this information is stuff which is out there, but we've had so many teaser trailers, so many random interviews with the showrunners, with actors, with lots of different people. This is just me pulling together all the little bits of information that we've got. So this is a character called Adar, and he appears to be, he's played by Joseph Maul, who you may remember as being Benjen Stark in Game of Thrones, and he's clearly a baddie. let's just be open about this. He comes across in season 1, he's going to be the most obviously bad guy that we get. Others will overtake him later on, I'm sure, but to start with, he's quite a bad guy. Now, what is intriguing about this character, he is clearly starting to lead the orcs, but near Mordor, which is quite a crucial point, I suspect. So he's gathering the orcs down in the south and east near Mordor. Well, while we think Sauron is out there somewhere and we don't know quite what's going on, it may well be that we start to think, is this Sauron? My guess is probably no. He's being presented as the bad guy straight away. I suspect they're wanting Sauron's identity to be kept hidden for quite some time, but his identity will be something important, because when we've seen some stills of him, the armor that he is wearing looks very, very much like elf armor. Why is this important? Could he have just stolen it from an elf? Well, yeah, he could have done. And that's maybe the most straightforward answer we've got here. But he changed his mind a few times on this, it's fair to say, but Tolkien's main or most accepted explanation for what the orcs are is originally they were corrupted elves. So originally Morgoth took elves and then he took them down into the basement of his the darkest dungeons, and then he tortured them, and then he did magic on them, and he corrupted them, and they turned it into orcs. And so that's what the original orcs were. So this character here possibly is one of the OG orcs elves who became an orc. the hint that we have to think about, is this an elf that we know of by name, or is this just a random elf? We don't know. Anyway, this character, Adar, is gathering the orcs together away from where the attention of our main heroes is, in the south and east, near to Mordor, and threatening the villages that people like Bronwyn live in. So he's gathering the orcs together. And Bronwyn and co are trying to resist. What this is Bronwyn seemingly hiding in a cupboard. Now, we do have, the showrunners did say, when talking about the action sequences of this, something which I think is quite intriguing, which is that there will be lots of action in this. But I know I have a concern, I'm sure many of you have a concern, that perhaps this might turn into something like the Hobbit movies, where it was just lots of big action sequences, losing a little bit of the plot along the way. What the showrunners have said is that they want, in some ways, to strip this down to, like, can we make orcs scary again? Orcs in the films are very much, they're the red shirts of the bad guys team. Let's be honest. They're the guys that they will just die by their hundreds and thousands. We don't think orcs are particularly powerful or menacing. But what the showrunners have said is, what about, imagine if an orc is in your kitchen? And that, I think, is what's happening here. This is Bronwyn hiding away while, and that's a hand creeping up, while an orc is breaking into her house. This should be quite scary. If you just kind of imagine the really good kind of War of the Worlds adaptations, where it's like, where are the aliens? That kind of feel. That is what I think they're going for here. Now, what happens there, we'll come back to the village itself in a moment, but here we have Bronwyn again with a character called Theo. Theo is her son. Now, what's happening here, we don't know the context. We get a couple of pictures of this here. She's hugging him tight. She's clearly emotional. Here he's got a staff. Is that a walking stick or something? If I had to guess, what's going on here is a Tolkien, I wouldn't call it quite a Tolkien trope, but he definitely has used this before in The Children of Húrin and a couple of other places, where one of the heroines or the parents say to their child, when they reach an age they think is old enough to look after themselves, where we are now is dangerous. Go, save yourself, take yourself out, look for the light, look for the good in this world, go and hunt, find a new place for yourself. I wonder whether that's what's happening here, is Bronwyn is sending Theo away. This place is dangerous. The orcs are at the doorstep. We can't defend it for much longer. Go. Find the better, the safer places to be. I have to be here. For whatever reason, she has to stay, but she can send Theo away. We'll pick up on Theo and indeed in Bronwyn in just one moment. But that's the situation happening. This is the lurking threat of evil which is happening underneath this everything is good and right with the world kind of feel. Then we get the dwarves. The dwarves in Khazad-dûm. This is as in all the other iterations of sort of Lord of the Rings world. The dwarves that we're focusing on are the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. Durin's folk, the Longbeards. This is Prince Durin, who will be Durin the Fourth, and he is holding what is almost certainly mithril. We don't know exactly when the dwarves found mithril. this seems like as fair a point as any. They certainly seem to have found it at least in the Second Age at some point. So they find Mithril. This is a game changer for them. Mithril is strong, it is light, it is powerful, it is beautiful. This is an astonishing thing for them to have found as they're digging deeper and deeper. And here he is holding it up. What's going to happen? Well, we have here, this is Durin the Third, his father, who is starting to say a few ominous words about, that the evil is out there, darkness, etc. But you've got this opportunity. Durin the Third will die. It's pretty clear. Durin the Fourth is the character who we're going to be seeing going through this TV show. Now, there is a lore issue here. If you're a dwarf fan, you'll know what I'm talking about straight away. Durin's folk have this belief, this legend, this it is a belief system, really. The founder was Durin, and Durin was going to be effectively reincarnated a few different times during the history of the dwarves, reincarnated 6 times. So they would go up to Durin the Seventh. And that means that there can't be more than one Durin at a time. Here, clearly there are. This is Durin the Third talking to Durin the Fourth. So there is a lore issue here that we may have to deal with. At that London event, there were people who care a lot about dwarf lore and did push this to the showrunners, and the answer they basically got was, just watch it and it'll be okay. Trust us. So we'll go with that. We'll trust them. On the face of it, this doesn't look like it kind of fits with Tolkien's canon, but we've been told to trust them, so let's see what they come up with. Anyway, we have the dwarves. They've discovered Mithril. Things seem to be going well. We've seen lots of pictures of Khazad-dûm, which does look amazing. This is exactly what Khazad-dûm should be looking like in the Second Age. It is light. It is airy. They had plants growing on. They had beautiful lanterns. There's a lot going on. This is a civilization at its height. Now, what we've got here, this is Princess Disa, who is Durin the Fourth's wife. She seems to be singing. There seems to be some sort of ceremony going on. This is some kind of mountain worship or stone worship. Maybe this is something connected with Durin the Third's death. We don't know the details of this yet, but it looks promising in as much as the dwarves have not been treated well, in my view, have not been treated well by the movies, particularly when you get Gimli, who's a fantastic character who goes through great character development. In the Peter Jackson movies, he's basically often just reduced to being comic relief. Jokes about his height, about the way he eats, about lots of different things, and it's just the dwarfs deserve better. So hopefully this is a hint to a greater culture that the dwarves have got beyond that we've seen on screen so far. Let's get to Numenor. Numenor is another culture at the height of its power, of its brilliance. We've got here, this is Miriel. Now, in the books, her father, Tar Palantir, died, and she should have inherited. But Uncle Pharazôn, bad guy, comes in, forces her to marry him, seizes the scepter from her, and proclaims himself king. He's going down a dark route. It seems that the show is going in a slightly different route with this, which is that I don't think we're going to necessarily see Palantir, her father. Pharazôn is described as being an advisor. So I think they're going to tweak slightly how this works. But the main point is that she is this woman who is wronged. She should be the queen, and she is not going to be made queen. But here she appears to be holding a baby for reasons we don't quite know, but perhaps in some kind of ceremony. There appear to be a few white things in the air. If I had... Oh, this is actually... I forgot I put this one in. It's quite dark, so you'll have to squint at it, but this appears to be Numenor. I'm at a loss. This is the center, the capital of Numenor, the first real shot we've had of it. Anyway, the white things which were in the air seem to be coming from this tree, the white tree. This was a gift from Tol Eressëa, effectively from the Undying Lands. This is a gift, a connection between the elves, between goodness and righteousness and Numenor. It's planted right there in the palace in the center of the island, and it's like you can hark forward to, if you remember the White Tree of Gondor, there are prophecies. Again, in the books, we get Tar Palantir, who has a vision or prophecy that when that tree dies, when it doesn't bloom anymore, then Numenor's going to face its doom, basically. So that is going to be quite central. It will carry on being quite central throughout, I'm sure, this story. Isildur has a great kind of rescue mission connected to this much later. But the leaves are falling, and this, for someone like Miriel, who perhaps, I think they're probably going to give her this kind of foresight role from that her father had in the books. I think they're probably going to give it to her. And here she's seeing the leaves falling, and I think this is making her go, hang on a moment, is the tree gonna die? Is it actually gonna happen? So we'll cut back to that image in just 1 second. So we've got the wider world that on the surface looks great. Everything seems fine. Everything seems good. Everything seems like we're living in this time of extended peace. The remnants of Morgoth's army have been scattered, and yes, there might be a few still out there, but they have no power. That's the feeling in the corridors of power of this world. However, underneath that, when you start to dig a little bit deeper, you see there's some concerns. The dwarves have some concerns about what's going on. Miriel has these prophecies about what might be about to come. Down in the far reaches of Middle-earth in the south and east, the orcs are starting to gather. They're threatening obscure villages. There's things not quite going right. Which brings us back to Galadriel. Galadriel has left. She's headed west, leaving Middle-earth, thinking that everything is going to be okay, or at least has accepted the wisdom of others that things are all right. But as far as we can tell, her boat gets destroyed by a massive sea monster. Here we see a massive sea monster. That in the foreground, you see, that is Galadriel swimming away from it. Now, they've probably been thinking about this for quite some time, because if you looked at the first few maps that they showed us, then out to sea, to the west of Middle-earth, they did a little picture of a sea monster. So maybe they were thinking about this from really quite early on. And it has to be said, this Galadriel set sail west and then didn't make it. This is new. And I should clarify here for Tolkien geeks, you will have already picked up on this. 90% of the stories we see in season 1 of The Rings of Power will be new stories. That doesn't mean they're going to be bad. That doesn't mean that they're going to be anti-Tolkien. Tolkien left huge gaps in the Second Age. He seems to be very happy, at least in theory, for other people to be filling in the gaps, and this is people filling in the gaps. So the fact that these are new stories should not be an issue for us in and of itself. The question is whether these are good stories, whether these are stories true to the spirit of Tolkien. We can talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, Galadriel's boat is destroyed by this big sea monster. She starts swimming. We've seen images elsewhere, lots of images. She ends up on some kind of a raft, a few bits of wood strapped together. Her and this character called Halbrand, who we will talk a bit more about later. He appears to have come from somewhere in the south of Middle-earth. We're told that he's trying to escape his past. Where is he headed? Who knows? But he ends up on a life raft with Galadriel. And the two of them end up in Numenor, which is an island in the middle of the sea. So when they reach Numenor, they kind of make contact with the people who are there. This is Galadriel and Miriel. So the sort of the queen or queen consort is, again, it's quite unclear exactly what her role here is, but they seem to have been in contact before, because Miriel says to Galadriel, the things that we feared are happening, or something along those lines in this trailer. And she shows her a palantir. Now, you will remember the palantiri from The Lord of the Rings. These are magical seeing stones. You can look through these. Tolkien did, if you read the Book of Unfinished Tales, there's a whole chapter he did all about what palantiri are, what they can do. And what we've seen them do in the main Lord of the Rings story is you can communicate with other people over long distances. You can see things happening far away. But you can also use them, says Tolkien, to see things in the future or in the past. So they're that magical that they're not limited to just seeing things that are happening right now. You can look through them and see things in the future or past. And this seems to be what happens here. Miriel shows this to Galadriel, and Galadriel, she puts her hand on it, she looks through it, and what does she see? War. This, when I first saw this image, I thought this is probably a flashback to earlier ages, First Age battle. We've seen lots of flashbacks to the First Age. I thought that might be what it is, but when you look a little closer, you see some of the armor on display seems to be Numenorian armor. So this is a future battle. This might even not be a battle we see in the first season. This is looking forward to what is happening. Bad things are happening. More bad things. War, flames, destruction. And this image, we've seen this before. And this is, for me, this is the most intriguing image out of all of the trailers that we've had so far. Because it could be a few different things. This could be looking back. This could be... the kinslaying at Aqualunde is a pivotal moment way back right at the very beginning of the First Age, even before probably technically the First Age started. Galadriel was there. She saw this. Elves killing elves, fire burning, horrendous things. This will be a clear and pivotal memory for her when she's thinking about, I have seen things that you have not seen. She might be thinking of things like that. Alternatively, this could be looking all the way forward to the doom of Numenor itself. Fires burning, people in the water, dead. So it's not 100% clear what this is. Either way, if this is looking into the Palantir, this is bad. This is not good. This is, things above ground, above water, a flame, below water, dead bodies. This is not good. So that's what Galadriel was doing. She met Miriel, and Miriel basically said, you know what? I think the wider world is not as happy and peaceful as we thought it was. Halbrand, meanwhile, he seems to be getting on all right here. It's quite clear. I think that's him on that horse there, but that's him coming out. He arrives at Numenor. We haven't seen enough about what happens to him after this, but he seems to settle in quite well. Galadriel gets on a boat. Now, she seems at this point, so she arrived, it would appear, she arrived in Numenor just with the clothes on her back, the very wet clothes on her back. Here, she's been given some armor, and she and Miriel appear to go now to Middle-earth to follow up on what they've seen. What is happening here? What is going on in this world? We're back into war mode. We're back into engaging with the enemy. The idea that this, however long it lasted, this idea that Galadriel had that maybe the war was over, maybe everything was okay now, that's gone. Galadriel is now heading back to Middle-earth to see what's really going on. Incidentally, I think I saw a few super chats and interesting comments going through. I will come back to these. What I wanted to do was go through all of this first, and then I will pick up on the questions afterwards, if that's right. So do keep the questions coming. I will come back to them. So she heads off. We have this image, which, again, it's not 100% clear where this is. Looks like this is Numenor. If this is Numenor, somebody burning a boat, it does seem to imply maybe there's someone who doesn't want Galadriel and Miriel to be heading off. Were they doing an act of sabotage? That's my best guess. But anyway, there's a boat burning. Boat burnings, again, have a history in Tolkien. So Galadriel's headed off. What else is going on? Well, Gil-galad was one of those people we saw gazing at the sky and seeing the comet. Now, in the books, Gil-galad was, before Galadriel, at least as far as we're told, Gil-galad was the person who first saw that there was some kind of evil brewing in the south and east of Middle-earth. He gets in contact with Numenor and basically says, we should do something about this. And they don't really, to be fair. Gil-galad identifies it there. Numenor sort of mobilizes, but they never really engage with the issue. And we're told that it was both too early and too late. Too late to nip it in the bud, but too early to actually be able to engage with it on a real level. So Gil-galad, hopefully, on the TV show, as he was in the books, will be one of the early people who sees that there is an issue here, who sees that actually evil is not defeated. What we've got here is Elrond visiting Khazad-dûm. Elrond seems to be working for Gil-galad at this point. Again, certainly he was in the books. He was like Gil-galad's right-hand man. And he's going to Khazad-dûm to check in with the dwarves, to see what's going on there, maybe to hear what their thoughts and concerns are about the world, maybe to build alliances. Certainly there was a clear alliance between the dwarves and some of the elves that happened and was forged in the Second Age. So that's what's happening here. Elrond is visiting Khazad-dûm. We've seen in other trailers, and we've been told that there's this rock splitting competition where Elrond has to prove his worth, smashing rocks. Doesn't really work for me in terms of giving dwarves a greater culture, but well, let's see what that looks like. Anyway, Elrond arrives here in Khazad-dûm, and it looks really impressive. There is at some point this meeting, which looks again to be in Khazad-dûm. On the left, if you look at the far left, that is Durin the Fourth. On the far right, that is Gil-galad. So that is the king of the dwarves and the king of the elves. And the other people you can see there, just sort of on the left facing us, is Elrond. On the right facing us is Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor is going to be pivotal in this. He is the person, as I'm sure we all know, he is the person who forges with Sauron. He is duped into forging the Rings of Power. And he is the person who sets up a colony just outside the doors of Khazad-dûm of craftsmen. and they create this wonderful partnership between the dwarves and the elves, which lasts for some time. And he is going to be absolutely crucial because he, as a character, and how they show him will, I mean, I'm on tenterhooks with this because I have very clear ideas about Celebrimbor based on what Tolkien wrote. Others seem to have different ideas, but he has ambitions, but and he has this lineage going back to Feanor, who we were talking about earlier, but he also seems to have a humility and purity to him that his ancestors did not have. It is going to be an amazing, that the actor is a very good actor, Charles Edwards. Wouldn't be who I'd have chosen purely based on the sort of the look, but I'm hoping that they've gone for quality of acting over the look. And well, again, we'll have to see, but he is going to be a central character here. But this does seem to be something of a meeting of trying to establish connection between dwarves and elves. Let's cut back. This is Theo again. Theo is the character, if you remember, he was the son of Bronwyn, so he comes from the south and east, and that the orcs were attacking, and we think he was sent away. We think he was sent away to go find a better place, somewhere safer, somewhere more good. And we have, in this shot, we have him holding the broken black sword. I speculated before on what this broken black sword might be. I suspect they probably won't go back that far into detail. It may well be what I've suggested, which is a very famous broken black sword from the First Age, but they probably won't quite name it. But he discovers this, and in any event, this sword does not look to be a good sword. This appears to be quite an evil sword, and you see him here holding his arm. If you kind of zoom in on this and one other image, it does look like this sword seems to have left a mark on him, which looks like it might again be a mark of Sauron that we saw earlier. So he is this young person who's been sent away, and he has somehow been marked by evil, by this sword. And that character you see there talking to him, this older guy, he's saying, "Have you heard of Sauron?" So Theo starts out as being this young, innocent boy, but is clearly getting into bad company. I think we need to keep an eye on Theo. And I don't know whether this was him that the showrunners are referring to, but the showrunners have said that they love the idea of looking at evil characters and working out where do they come from, what's the starting point, how do they end up where they were. And we do have some characters who will undeniably be evil and might not have started evil in the Nazgul, the humans who were given the rings of power, particularly the Witch King. We have to be looking out for who might be the Witch King here. We will see the Witch King in this, given a ring of power, and quickly. In the books, it took hundreds of years, but here it will have to be quickly falling under Sauron's control. Might Theo be one of them? It's entirely possible. In any event, he's got an evil sword, and he's got a new advisor who's trying to talk to him about Sauron. This doesn't look good for him so far. This is that sword again, and it's been held by someone else. This doesn't look like Theo. And although I've not got the clip itself, you'll see the end of that sword. There's a little bit of fire going on. The sword is coming back. It's remaking itself. So this might have been a relic from the older days. This might have been a relic from the First Age or even earlier, but it is being recreated, and it does have this hint of Morgul blade about it. This is not a good sword. But let's return to the village that Theo seems to have moved on from. They are facing the orcs. This is Arondir. Arondir seems to be that there's a battle somewhere along these lines. We see Adar leading his orcs up this long walkway towards what looks like some kind of fortified place. Arondir here seems to be in the same area, defending it. So the orcs attack, Arondir and others defend, but Arondir gets captured. Here he is. We've seen lots of pictures of him in chains. If you look at him, he's there. I mean, you might have to sort of stare at this one a little bit. He's there on sort of the left of this, and he's on the end of a long chain, which seems to have been held by an orc, and he seems to be in perhaps some kind of fighting pit. It's not 100% clear, but we see him doing lots of really cool things here and in the other trailers. He's leaping about all over the place. He's catching arrows mid-flight and shooting them back. He is basically, I think the shorthand version of this is that he is basically going to be the Legolas of this TV show. He's the action hero who looks really cool doing stuff. So that's what he's about here. We see him here in the dark, and it's quite hard to see, but in the trailer, what happens just after this, some hands come out, grab him, and pull him back. So it looks like he's backed up into something. Now, what those hands are, we don't know. It's very dark. They could be orc hands, or possibly, I have a question on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, possibly, as he seems to be backing up against some sort of woodland area, possibly this is Ents saving him. I think we will see Ents in this TV show. But let's go back to the village. The village we have here is visited by Galadriel and Miriel. We saw them a little bit earlier. They got a boat. They headed off. And I should say, this is probably still only roughly halfway through the season. The second half of the season, I don't think they've shown us much footage from yet. This is still only roughly halfway through the season. But Galadriel, Miriel arrive here in this village. We see Bronwyn is there as well. This appears to be something's going on. This is not them. They're sat down in tables outside, but then there's a lot of dust. Are they being attacked? It does look likely, because then we get these shots. This is Galadriel. That looks to be the village. There's fire, there's smoke, there's a lot of dust. Now, this does tie back to something that the show, not the showrunners, Morgoth Clark, who plays Galadriel, said. I think perhaps even in the very first interview we had with Vanity Fair, she was talking about the scale of this production. And she said they even had dust consultants. How does dust settle? And this seems to be why they needed a dust consultant. Dust has, there's some kind of explosion. Dust is all over the place. And here, it's on her eyelashes. There is dust everywhere. So that's the level of detail they're going on to. Whatever else, whether this show is going to be good or bad, it will go down in history as being the show that had the most money spent on it, on absolutely every aspect of production across the piece. They have spared no expenses on this. So that the village seems to get attacked. Galadriel is there, and this seems to be her afterwards. She's got the armor on that she got from Numenor. That sword looks like the sword that somebody was holding up in the village earlier. So she seems to be given the armor in Numenor, the sword by that village. And here she is. What is she going to do? She has now seen firsthand the orcs are there. The orcs are moving. Adar is mobilizing them. What's she going to do? Well, perhaps this is cutting forward a little bit. We don't know. We don't have any contacts with it. context for this. This is her leading a cavalry charge against some orcs. That makes most sense, but we will probably have to wait and see. So, the arc of this first half of the Rings of Power is setting the scene for how do we get to this point at which the Rings of Power can be forged, and the disparate forces of evil which were there can get themselves into a force which can threaten all of Middle-earth. What's going on with the good guys to allow that to happen? That is the arc. That is the question, the fundamental question we're seeing, certainly in the first half of season 1. We've got the elves who are living happily in Lindon, sending people back to Valinor. We've got the Numenorians who've built this great civilization and feeling very comfortable. We've got the dwarves who found Mithril and seeing great future possibilities going on there. But underneath all this, there are rumblings. There's things that are not right. And here we have the most obvious example. We have this, it's not very easy to see here. This is a character that we've not been told huge amounts about. Flanked, it would appear, by a couple of Numenorians. Here is a closer up shot. Now, who is this? Well, when the trailer came out, lots of people immediately jumped to the conclusion that this is Sauron, because we've not seen Sauron yet. At least we don't think we've seen Sauron, and this person looks evil, and yet also slightly fair of visage, which is what Tolkien said that Sauron, when Sauron appeared in the form of Anatar, that's what he was looking like. So that was the first reaction. The second reaction appeared to be, well, who does this also look like? Eminem, hence this being Eminem Sauron. I personally suspect this isn't Sauron. So, sorry to spoil the fun. Personally, I suspect this is a priest or priestess of Morgoth, who is there behind, just sort of behind the scenes, trying to rally support, trying to get the forces of evil back together. Here, that look, that is very much a kind of a priesty kind of look, isn't it? And here again, this is too obviously evil, in my view, for them to create for Sauron and just drop it randomly in the middle of a trailer without anything else. This is another character who is being one of the sort of the evil lieutenants here. But the last thing in the trailer that we should talk about, I think, is this, again, this character who is there, we see in the dark, looks like in caves, maybe Moria? It's hard to say exactly. Has a leaf in their hand and blows the leaf, and the leaf flies off. Now, why do I think possibly Moria? We've seen this leaf on a different image, completely different place, where Durin is holding a random leaf that looks like it came from Lindon. Here, the leaf is blows across the screen, and then it settles and then bursts into flame. All very symbolic. Why would a leaf suddenly burst into flame? Well, that was the next image we had. This is a Balrog. I'm struggling to see where this fits in. This is my honest answer. It could be part of the flashback to the first age. There were Balrogs in the first age. Absolutely fine. So perhaps it's part of the flashback to there. We are aware of one Balrog that survived. Maybe more did. I don't know. They could play. The gaps are there for them to play in. So maybe we've got another Balrog happening. But the Balrog we know about, Durin's Bane, during the Second Age was basically hibernating deep underground. Doesn't appear again until the time of Durin the Sixth. So another couple of Durins down the road. And that's the one that we see facing off against Gandalf much later. So is this that? Is this that who not hibernating, but is actually there actively stirring the forces of evil underneath Khazad-dûm? Is that why that leaf burst into flame, because it came close to this creature of flame? It's possible. It's not anti-canon. It's but I'm not 100% with it. It has to be said. So that's where we're at. We're left with a mystery. This was the last shot of that trailer, and it's clearly a shot that they know that everybody will instantly recognize as a Balrog. There's a Balrog. What's going on? So that's another mystery that we've got going on there, and we have a few mysteries happening here. We've got the who is Sauron, who is Meteor Man, what's going on with Halbrand, what kind of past is he trying to escape from, what's going on with Adar, is he an elf that we've heard of before? These are the mysteries around the outside of this, where our main characters, Galadriel, Elrond, Durin, these characters are trying to figure out what on earth is going on. Season 1 is the build-up to the events that we know, Tolkien geeks know, happen in the Second Age. Season 2 will be the forging of the Rings of Power, probably. This is the build-up to that moment. This is the time when we're moving from everything is peaceful and calm through to a situation where Sauron can exploit the problems that there are out in Middle-earth for his own benefit. Okay, that's my overview. I said it would take half an hour. It took a bit longer than half an hour. What I will do is I will try and pick up on a few of these. I'm sure we had a few questions coming through while I was talking. Callum Barnes saying, my headcanon is that the Witch King is our Farazon. What's the likelihood we see the origins of the Nazgul and your feel as to who they could be? Okay, so will we see the origins of the Nazgul? Yes, 100%. We will not see the rings distributed to them until probably season 3 would be my guess. I think season 2 is going to be the forging of the rings, and possibly the immediate aftermath of that, season 3 will be the distribution of the rings, I suspect. Season 1, we will probably see the characters who will become the ring wraiths, at least some of them. Now, Tolkien doesn't tell us huge amounts about who these are. We're told 3 of them are Númenóreans. One of them we know is called Camul the Easterling. So presumably he's an Easterling. And the other 5, we're simply not told. But these are kings, warriors, sorcerers of their time. People who were seeking power. Now, almost certainly we will see the Witch King, because the Witch King is the main one. Almost certainly we will see the Witch King, and almost certainly we have seen the Witch King in season 1, or we will see in season 1. We have seen the trailers. Your idea that Farazon is the Witch King, I mean, it doesn't work in the books because the Nazgul were created much before that. But on the TV show, it's possible they might go down that route. Personally, I think they will take and use Farazon as I'll roll back a little bit from this and take the bigger issue, which is time contraction is a problem here in lots of different ways. But the biggest problem it's going to be for them is Númenor, because Númenor has this 3,500 years worth of history. this slow ascent and then this slow descent. If you just have the first 1,000 or so years of history, you cut a lot of that slow descent. Now, you could just try and squash all of that into the first 1,000 years, but I think what they're going to do is they have to show the fall of Numenor on this show. They're squashing it down into one. And in order to do that, they have to show us a person so that we can see the human impact of this, who falls. Pharazôn is going to be the one. I'm sure he's not going to start as like a brilliantly perfect human being, but I think we will see the descent of Pharazôn from someone who is relatively upright to being someone who takes control of Numenor and then takes Numenor in a bad and dark way. I think that's what we're going to see in that character. And that means I think that he does not become one of the Nazgul. I think they have to keep him as a human. They have to keep him as a human who can be leading the Numenorean people on this assault on Valinor. So I personally don't think it's him. We have other characters. We've seen, there's a family photo there of the Pharazôn and family, and also obviously Halbrand arrives now in Numenor. We don't know his background and history. We don't know where he's fleeing from, but he's opening up the possibility that he might be one of the Nazgul, because we need 3 of them from Numenor. It has to be one of the characters that we know. And for all of these, you have to say, I don't think they're going to completely change. I don't think they would be allowed by the Tolkien estate, who have been involved in this, to completely change one of the characters that we know. So they couldn't just say, Elrond, actually, you know what? Forget everything you knew about Elrond. He's going to become a Nazgul. They're not going to go down that route. They're going to try and stick roughly to the main points that we know. So the people who become Nazgul will be characters that we grow to know, but are new characters. That's the hint that I've got anyway. Chris Andron, thank you for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. Perhaps one of my moderators will be able to pick that up and bring it to my attention a little bit later. Mara Lee saying, huge thank you for all the fabulous content, merch, and stories. Looking forward to hearing the Tom Bombadil song when you reach 400k subscribers. Yeah, for the if you're new here, you've no idea what that is. I have got the best moderators in the world. If you're watching this live, and you're taking part in the chat, please just show some love to the moderators. They deserve it. They do an amazing job keeping the chat as an open and accessible place, somewhere where everyone can feel safe. That's the most important thing. Just getting rid of any kind of hate going on. This is a positive channel. We're talking about things that we love. We might not always agree with each other, but we're enthusiastic about the things that we enjoy, and they are doing a great job there. They will also, when the TV show happens, there will almost always are spoilers, and so their jobs get a whole lot harder just trying to stop people spamming and spoiling stuff. And I can genuinely say, because I had moderators during Game of Thrones Season 8, they did an amazing job not making sure people weren't spoiled, making sure that this was a place that everyone could come and just chat about the stuff that we love. So I've got amazing moderators, and they occasionally ask for very little in return, which, because they're incredibly generous people. But what they do ask is, when I reach milestones, they often say, can I just do a thing, a silly little thing? And this time around, when I hit 400k subscribers, and I think I'd have to check, I think I'm on 391,000 at the moment, so it's not too far away. They have asked for me to sing a Tom Bombadil song. So if you're a lover of great music, I heartily recommend that you mute that part of the live stream, but it is happening because I have made my commitment. Marily, thank you also for the super stickers. I hugely appreciate that. So Andrew Case saying that the actor who plays Halbrand looks scarily similar to Viggo Mortensen. Yeah, he does. There's something about the finely chiseled features. I have to agree there. I did have another chat I wanted to quickly go to. So Ulite saying, "Hi Robert, I read somewhere that actors from the show said that the show aims to erase Tolkien's work for the sake of modernity. Is this true? If it is, what are your thoughts on it? Much love to you." Well, thank you very much. No, that's not true. Erasing Tolkien's work is not only not what anyone said, that is absolutely contrary to what everyone said. No one is trying to erase Tolkien's work for the sake of anything. So I'm not defending. I've not seen the show yet. None of us have seen the show yet. It might be that I hate it. I don't think I'm going to hate it. Incidentally, I'm coming around to it more the more I see of it. But no, the actors are not erasing Tolkien's work for the sake of modernity. No one has said that. I've paid more attention to this than any sane human should do, and I can guarantee you no one has ever said that. What some have said is that this is Tolkien's work in being adapted in our modern world or something along those lines, which is absolutely right. What Tolkien wanted, he cared about applicability. He cared about stories which could be told in a timeless way. And so, yes, that's what's happening. I think some of it, I should probably say some of it is useful correctives to what has previously been a quite myopic perspective of what Middle Earth should look like. As one random example, and this is not me trying to make a point anything other than sticking to what Tolkien said, Harfoot's Sam Gamgee described as having brown skin. I've got absolutely no problem with Sean Astin. I thought he did an absolutely outstanding job as Sam Gamgee. But if you wish to be accurate to Tolkien's works, then some of the hobbits, for example, should have had darker skin. Now, I don't think anyone's trying to do that. Erase anything is the short answer. I don't think I need to talk more about it. But no one has ever said that, as far as I can tell. Robinson88 saying, yeah, Tolkien wanted to tell an historical myth, not a modern story. Absolutely agreed. That's I've got a question on that coming up actually as well. Kevin saying pretty sure Halbrand is Sauron. Yeah, I mean this is a possibility. So we've got a few characters to look out for. We've got Sauron, we've got the future Witch King and other Nazgul, and they will, I am absolutely sure, be trying to throw us a few curveballs here, trying to give us a few characters who look evil to make us think, "Ooh, is that person Sauron?" But we have to keep ourselves on our toes. Sauron, I'm sure I will say this many times over the course of the next few months. Sauron, at this stage, effectively can shapeshift. If you read back in the Silmarillion, there's times when he changed in the space of a paragraph. He changed his appearance 3 times. Sauron, we're told that he came of fair hue, looking good, but that doesn't mean all the time he looked like that. Sometimes he changed his appearance. So leave open the possibility, just in your minds, that we have got more than one person who is playing Sauron. Sauron can look like more than one different person. Alex B asking, does the consensus so far seem to be that Meteor Man is a wizard or Maiar? So Meteor Man, again, this is one of the other big mysteries. Who is this guy who has appeared coming from the heavens in this meteor? So the first thing to say is that it appears that there is clearly magic happening here. obviously there is magic happening here. Some people don't normally appear in meteors. Pardon me. So he's not human. He's not a normal elf. There's nothing average about this person. Whatever he appears like, he is something special. And if we are sticking to Tolkien's sort of categories of who people are, rather than creating something entirely new, which you could do. You've got people like Tom Bombadil, who is clearly outside of the sort of the normal rules of things. I don't think this is a Tom Bombadil type character, but if you're sticking to it, then yes, some sort of Maiar-ish character does seem the most likely at the moment. And added to which, the idea that this person arrives as an old man, that does echo, obviously, how the Astari arrived, looking like old men. That's Ariana May saying Tolkien was heavily influenced by Christian worldviews and the wars of the time. His work is not without reflection on his modern environment. I will talk a little bit more about that later. Mark Shisa saying, after the changes this trailer revealed are happening, I see the chances for Meteor Man to Gandalf rising. Personally, I hope this isn't Gandalf. Gandalf shouldn't arrive until the Third Age. So I'm hoping not. But again, this is something we've been told right from the very beginning in terms of adaptations of Tolkien's work. Is, as far as the Tolkien estate are concerned, then you can't go against the fundamentals of what happened when and who did what. You can't go against the fact that Sauron forged the One Ring. You can't go against the fact that Numenor rose and fell and then was destroyed by Eru Ilúvatar. You can't go against these fundamentals of the world. But where there are gaps, you can create new things. That seems to be what the Tolkien estate have said. And so what we could expect to see is things that happen in the gap. And if there's nothing that Tolkien wrote that explicitly said, this is the only way, and I don't want this to happen, but if it did end up this way, and I don't think this is going to happen, but if it did end up this way, that it was, say, Gandalf being Meteor Man, then it would have to be that there's nowhere that it explicitly says Gandalf did not come to Middle-earth in the Second Age. Otherwise, they just fill in that you can just fill in the gaps. Jason Keane saying, fantastic summary. Thank you very much. The ICE, Iron Crown Enterprises RPG canon is an incredible resource. How much do you think they may have been influenced by it? Well, it is actually. And I'm an old-time tabletop role player and have played the Iron Crown Enterprises role-playing game. It has a lot of information in there, some of which they have added to and made up. They did supplements with lots of background and history about areas that we didn't have background and information from Tolkien, but it felt right. All of it felt right. It looked right. One of the things that I would say, I'll answer your specific question in a moment. One of the things which was quite intriguing was the fact that one of the Nazgul being a woman, which doesn't seem to go against Tolkien, what Tolkien said. He talks about men, mortal men, but he uses men to refer to all of humanity. So that's one way. I do wonder whether they might head that way, because by the Third Age, they're disappeared. They might be Nazgul, but they're wraiths. They're invisible, effectively. But how much might they be influenced? I suspect not much is the honest answer, unless they are secretly role players, and I've not heard that they are. I would love them to be. If only for the imagery, some of the artistry in there is pretty amazing. Super Desi saying merp, merp, merp. Yes, that's what it was called. Middle Earth role playing. Let's go to a question. Oh, Mark Schuster talking about trailer. Tolkien explicitly wrote that he was buried by Luthien and Beren. Galadriel was nowhere near. Galadriel. I would allow this slight tweak to lore in as much as we're not told that Galadriel was near, but that doesn't mean that she wasn't. If you go to, actually, I will read this because I've misquoted it so many times. I thought at some point I will actually have it in front of me. This is from the Book of Unfinished Tales. Apologies, this is a slight digression, but this is important, I think. Anyway, there is a whole chapter that Christopher Tolkien, for those who don't know the Book of Unfinished Tales, this was Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, who pulled together all of his notes. He basically wrote the Silmarillion. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote it, but Christopher Tolkien editorialized it and pulled it together into the narrative that we have. And then he found he got lots of other bits of paper lying around, random stories that Tolkien had started and not quite finished, and bits of background and history and lore. He went off and did a whole series of stuff on that, but the first and biggest was the Book of Unfinished Tales, and in that there is a chapter called The History of Galadriel and Killerborn. And this starts wonderfully with, there is no part of the history of Middle-earth more full of problems than the story of Galadriel and Killerborn, and it must be admitted that there are severe inconsistencies embedded in the traditions, or to look at the matter from another point of view, that the role and importance of Galadriel only emerged slowly, and that her story underwent continual refashionings. So that is Christopher Tolkien's way of saying there's no clear, strong narrative of what Galadriel was doing, which partly allows this, I think, in the Second Age to say she went off and did this, she went off and did that. We've got Christopher Tolkien saying, we don't know. Because Tolkien his father had so many different versions of what was going on during that period. So where did I start on that one? Yes, the idea that Galadriel wasn't there. I will allow them this a little bit. Personally, I'm not so much of a stickler for Tolkien lore that the idea that she couldn't have seen his dead body, she could have done. But the version of Beren and Luthien that we had in the Silmarillion was the one that Christopher Tolkien pulled together. And if Christopher Tolkien then says, oh, by the way, asterisk, we don't know where Galadriel was during this time, then I'll accept that there's some wiggle room there. Ancient Troopers saying Galadriel was part of Noldor. In her youth, she wanted to rule a realm of her own. When Frodo offered her the ring and she rejected it, she passed her test. She won between rule and wisdom. Yeah, absolutely. Galadriel did. What we do know is that Galadriel did go on this huge character journey from being proud, a word Tolkien uses for her lots of times in her youth, proud and wanting to rule a land of her own, and reaching the point where she can reject ultimate power in the ring. Just one thing while we're doing this, what was in the lore and what appears on the show. One thing I've not seen many people talk about, but this Galadriel getting on a boat, as far as we can tell, getting on a boat to go back to Valinor is a clear decision on the showrunner's part to say that she was allowed to, because there were a couple of different versions that Tolkien wrote, one of which was that at the end of the First Age, everybody got pardoned for what they'd done before, and all of the Noldor could return back, including Galadriel, but Galadriel decided to stay. Another version that Tolkien wrote was that they said everyone is forgiven and everyone can come back except Galadriel. And that's why Galadriel hung around in Middle-earth for a lot longer, because she still had to learn that lesson that she learned back at the end of the Third Age. So this idea that she got on a boat and tried to go back to Valinor but got stopped, this is completely new. This isn't... I don't know. If I were to try and pick holes in this and say this is not Tolkien lore, then that would be one of the things that I would go with. Okay, let's go to some questions from my patrons. Callum Barnes saying, my headcanon is that the Witch King is our Farazon. We had this, maybe you put this in the super chat actually. What's the likelihood of the origins of the Nazgul and your feels as to who they could be? So, yeah, I think just to pick up on the wider Nazgul thing, I think if I had to pick for Theo, if you remember that, the child who was sent away and clearly is getting into bad company, I wonder whether they count him as an Easterling. I wonder whether he's going to become Kamul the Easterling. He's Theo, but maybe he will take on a new name. That would be my best guess. I think that they will probably show us the 3 in Numenor, so we will actually see them by their faces. The other 5, I suspect we probably won't get to see them specifically. We will just hear that there are people rising to power in certain areas who then become the Nazgul. Creative Branch is saying, hello, what do you think Tolkien meant when he said he disliked allegory? This is picking up, I told you I had a question on this, so I'll answer this one properly at this point. Saying, what do you think he meant when he said he disliked allegory? From what I can tell, he uses allegory. What do you think is the difference between allegory and history in his eyes? And do you think this question could shed light on the fear of misrepresentation in the current backlash? Just as an aside, I think the backlash that was there does seem to be lessening as we're seeing more and more of it. This is just my own personal observation. I think people are starting to get more reassured by what they said. That may change in the future. That's just my general observation where we're at. But this is what Tolkien said, and thank you, Creative Branches, for quoting this for me as well. This is what he said in his introduction to, I think it was the 2nd edition of The Lord of the Rings. This appeared in Fellowship, and it's probably in your edition as well as his introduction to the story. He writes, I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader and the other in the purposed domination of the author. So this is the line that Tolkien draws here, is the intention of the creator to make you see this person and that situation mean this, in which case it's clear allegory, or is the intention of the writer to say, I want you, the reader, to decide what this means for you? Tolkien hated the first and loved the second. He was a great student of myths, and he saw, I mean, he loved Norse myths, but Greek myths, other myths, so it applies across the piece. Through time, people take them and they draw lessons from them for their own time, for their own experience. The story remains the same. The story sometimes gets tweaked here and there, but the applicability remains because we are in charge of taking the lessons from it. It's not the writer telling us A equals B. So he had these arguments with C.S. Lewis because Aslan equals Jesus. He thought that was just so obvious. He thought that was not good. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's just it kind of diminishes the art form, that actually all you're doing is saying the thing you want to do in another form. He wanted to create something that people could take lessons from forever. And so we have, as an example that we can quite easily take in, certainly from my culture, if you take something like Robin Hood. Now, Robin Hood, over time, Robin Hood emerged in 11th, 12th century, and over time, although the stories have remained broadly the same, people have drawn different lessons from this. Some people have drawn stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. Some people have drawn lessons about resisting oppressors. Some people have drawn lessons about being in tune with nature and living as merry men within the forest. Lots of different lessons that people take from this, and that's what Tolkien was wanting to do with the Lord of the Rings. He wasn't wanting it to be A equals B. And he follows this up. He talks about this at quite great length in that introduction. He follows it up by talking about a couple of examples. The first is the Second World War, and indeed the First World War. The world, when he was publishing this was only a few years after the Second World War. This is very fresh in everyone's mind still. An all-consuming war. And critics were saying, well, this is clearly, Tolkien is talking about the rise of fascism or whatever. And he's saying, no, it's not. This is not about a specific thing going on there. Secondly, he recognized that some people could see the fact that there's a love of nature here that came from his own upbringing. He grew up around the village of Sarehole, which has now been swallowed up in wider Birmingham in central England, and that kind of rural idyll that was there with the watermill, with the fields and the trees, that clearly comes across. And when you look at his story, all of the heroes in some way are in tune with nature, explicitly or implicitly, and all of the bad guys are against it, or they're in charge of wanting mechanization, hiding from the sun, disliking trees, that kind of thing. So he recognized this, and he said words to the effect of, no writer can, and any honest writer will say this, no writer can ever truly distance themselves from their own experiences. No one can ever write outside of their own experiences. So yes, this was him pouring himself into this, but what he was doing in terms of how he presents it to us, the readers, is very clearly saying, this is not me telling you, you must love nature. That's not what I'm doing. This is not me telling you, you must oppose fascist regimes. But people can draw these lessons from them, and that's absolutely fine and good. So that's the sort of the overall feel we've got there. When we transplant that across to the TV show, my hope for the TV show, and I've not seen it, as I say, I've not seen it, none of us have seen it yet, so I cannot say, but my hope for the TV show is they keep that feel. They keep that idea, and the showrunners, everyone has said this is what they're trying to do, so let's take them at their word so far. They're trying to make this applicable, but not trying to ram home any particular meanings. So that is what part of the feel of Tolkien is, and we're all about what does this feel like Tolkien's writing. So that I hope Creative Branches that answers your question, and the others who've talked about applicability and allegory in the chat. It's something Tolkien was passionate about. Reflective Rambling Super Chat, you just retracted that one. let me know if that was something that was something I need to pick up on. Spielkalb von Sparta says, at San Diego Comic-Con, Falazon's actor said he had to incorporate the whole history of Numenor. Time compression. What's your take on that? Yeah, this was what I was talking about actually earlier, that they are clearly, one of the issues they have to deal with time compression is this idea that the fall of Numenor in Tolkien's world took hundreds, thousands of years. Here, it will take a few years, not many at all. And the main character we will see this through the lens of is Pharazôn. Now, that means that he is actually quite crucial to making this whole thing work, because we have to believe it. We have to believe that this great civilization can crumble and fall in that short space of time. We have to believe, because a lot of this thematically is about the pursuit of immortality and jealousy of the elves, and we have to see that happen not over hundreds of years, which makes thematic sense. We live and die, and our children live and die, and their children live and die, and that same elf is still looking exactly the same. Why on earth do they get to live forever and we don't? That is one of the themes which runs through the story of Numenor. That has to be compressed down into one or 5 series, and the figurehead of all of this has to be Pharazôn. So that's what I think he means by this. And we will see, I think we will see the fall of Numenor mirrored in him. So I think he will start out not being necessarily a great human being, but I think that he will be representative of the pride and power of Numenor, and then slowly he will fall into worrying about his own mortality. He will start thinking about, why is it I'm getting older? Why is it that they're not getting older? Why can't I have what they've got? This is not fair. Let's turn our back on the elves. Let's turn our back on the Valar. All of that is encapsulated in him as a character. So it's going to be a central character to this, which is good, because our Pharazôn could be quite two-dimensional, but it sounds like they're trying to make him more complex. So I've got high hopes for it. Not seen anything from that character yet, but yeah, what the actor said made a lot of sense to me. A reflective rambling saying didn't want to cause trouble. Wording was causing some issues. Okay, not a problem. And JT Soul saying, so it's a new story that contains both Tolkien's characters doing new things and entirely new characters. Essentially, the setting is Tolkien's, but the story itself isn't based on any of his works. Yes, although this is a 5-season arc. We're seeing just season 1 at the moment. What we will see later on in the seasons are the key posts, the big beats of the story, as it were, of the Second Age. We will see the forging of the rings. We will see the rise of Nazgul. We will see Isildur and the faithful in Numenor. We will see the last alliance of elves and men. Things that we know happen. I would call them Tolkien stories, but he never stretched them out into full stories. He just gave us the headlines of what was happening. So the further into this 5 seasons we get, the more they will be bound by what Tolkien wrote. Which does make you, I mean, this is quite brave. Whatever else, this is quite brave. They could have just gone straight into that. They could have gone into the safety and security of Tolkien's clear story outlines, but they decided to take one step back and say, we'll have an introductory season. We'll have a season that shows us these characters before all of that happens. So brave. Hopefully that comes off. But this is Tolkien's world. We've got some new characters. We've got some characters we know about. 90% of the story in season 1 is going to be completely new. Just about L saying, do you think the Blue Wizards will make an appearance? I quite hope they will. In one of the many iterations that Tolkien came up with, then they were there in the Second Age, off to the east, which normally would mean that we don't know much about what they're doing, but we are covering things off to the east. And whereas in the Third Age, when they arrived, it seems that they kind of fell. In the Second Age, they were good, disrupting what the machinations of Sauron. So I hope we do. It may well be that they don't show them until later on, until like season 2 or 3 or something. So Micah P, though, saying they were sent since 1000 in the Third Age. This was the Astari, I think you're talking about, as a way for the Valar to keep tabs and to give wisdom and support. They didn't want to repeat what happened in the Second Age. Yeah, so that's that. I mean, this is part of why I don't particularly want Gandalf to be appearing. He shouldn't be appearing in the Second Age. Dan Edwards saying, telling Celebrimbor making rings and then dying would only be worth a few hours of TV time. That doesn't make a series. Yeah, it doesn't, but it is the center of what happens in the Second Age, because then you get the distribution of the rings, then you get the fall of Numenor, then you get the Last Alliance. So you can get all of these things. And again, for what it's worth, this may crash and burn. I hope it doesn't. But I do admire the desire to paint on a large canvas. I admire the idea that we're not just telling one discrete story. We have had confirmation that, yes, one of the ideas that was pitched to Amazon was young Aragorn, which could have been a fun show. But what this is massive. This is lots of huge stories. So I like that. I want that. I hope it's going to be good. I applaud the large canvas. Andrew K saying, do you feel the timeline compression is the hardest choice to overcome for this series? And if not, what would you say it is? Yeah, absolutely. I think timeline compression, from the moment that they said it, and again, I'll give them credit that they recognized that in the very first article we had, they said the thing the fans will get most angry about is the timeline compression. They know this. It's the thing that I'm most concerned about, because this has a flow and a rhythm, and I at that London event, I cornered the showrunners and I asked them about it. And actually, one of the questions that I asked them specifically about timeline compression was, what do you think is going to be the biggest loss? What's the thing you're going to lose out? Because I understand why they did it. I get it. From a TV producer's perspective, I understand. They think this will work more easily if we have the same characters through the entire 5 seasons, rather than here's a season with all these characters, then everyone but the elves dies, and we've got an entirely new cast for season 2, and then at the end of that, everyone but the elves dies, and then that doesn't work very well for TV. So I understand it, and I understand why they went with it. But what I wanted to know from them was what they thought was the biggest loss. Now, I don't know what answer I was expecting, to be honest. But the answer I got from, I think this was Patrick K, was, for him, the biggest loss was the story of the Mariner's Wife. Now, perhaps I was hoping they would say the biggest losses were the themes of eternity and mortality or something, but this was a very specific answer, a very practical answer. For those who don't know, this is the only actual story of the Second Age that Tolkien wrote. He didn't completely finish it, but again, you'll find it in the Book of Unfinished Tales, and it's a really good story. It's it's set partway through the Second Age, and shows where I think it's the 5th king of Numenor, it might be the 4th, where they make contact with Middle-earth again, because for the first few hundred years of Numenor's history, they were basically just isolationist. They didn't contact anyone, but then they made contact. Then Gil-galad gets in touch and says, you know what, I'm starting to get a bit suspicious about what's going on in the southeast of Middle-earth. We should do something about that. This is them re-engaging with the mainland, and it's a great little story, but it's not going to be in the TV show. Exclusive for you there. If you were hoping for that, I don't think many people were expecting it to happen, but that is a loss. So is this the biggest thing? Yes, for not specific reasons like that. I think for the knock-on effects of the time compression, particularly in Numenor, but also in places like, what does this mean for Khazad-dûm? We've already, I sort of obliquely mentioned the lore issues between the difference between having during the third and during the fourth alive at the same time. The Real Rebel saying, I believe Sauron is Adar, the stranger and possibly Hellbrand, who appears at different times in the Second Age, infiltrating his enemies to size them up. Do you think we have seen Sauron yet? The idea that it's all three of those, I don't think it's likely to be all three of those. I having said that this could be more than one actor, I think it absolutely could be more than one actor. The stranger is Meteor Man. Adar is the guy down in the sort of the south and east raising up the army of orcs. Hellbrand is this guy who washes up on Numenor. Is Sauron all of them? I doubt it. Is Sauron one of them? Quite possibly. The thing is that they need Sauron in season 2 will appear as Anatar, Lord of Gifts, with his fair hue. This is sexy Sauron. The idea that he then infiltrates his enemies to size them up, I love that idea. That makes a lot of sense, that he would then go and try and find out what's going on in different places, taking on a different appearance each time. I think that works well. I think we have probably already seen Sauron in one of the trailers somewhere along the line. I think they're going to keep it very close who that is, though. Missing Sook saying, have you covered that Adar means father in Sindarin? I haven't mentioned that yet, but yes, that's what it is. So the idea that this is father, the implication is that this is the father of the orcs, and that is what they are calling out to him, which has led to some confusion as to whether this is a name or a title. So the orcs call out Adar to him, and this is like, father. He is acting as a father figure to them. So the possibility is there that that's not his actual name, which leaves open the possibility that this is an elf, a corrupted elf who we do know the name of, which in one way I quite like, but it really depends on who that elf is, whether or not I actually like it. As a concept, I like it. One of the original corrupted elves that has survived. Question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola. I'm still relatively new to Tolkien's world. If I want to prepare for the TV show, which of Tolkien's books should I read? I've read The Lord of the Rings, though not the appendices, The Hobbit, and I'm a third of the way through The Silmarillion. Thank you. Okay, so great start. I would say you've still got a little while before the TV show. If you're wanting an overview of what was happening, I think the appendices to The Lord of the Rings are actually pretty good. The history to them, for those who don't know, Tolkien wanted to when he'd written The Lord of the Rings and he sort of sent it to his publishers, he says that I've also written this other thing here, the Silmarillion. I think that would be great together. Everyone would love it. It'd be fantastic. And the publishers went, well, we really like The Lord of the Rings. The Silmarillion, it's quite hard going, you know, it's not a follow-up to a children's story that we're expecting, which you may have found as you're reading the Silmarillion. If you are reading the Silmarillion, finding it hard going, don't worry, everyone does to a degree. It's written in a very different style to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's great, well worth a second read, but it can be quite hard going. And the publishers were not sure about this, and Tolkien was like to and fro, and eventually he came to a compromise, which was that he would take what he'd written, which became the Silmarillion, and he would compress it down into a version that he could include as appendices to the Return of the King. And so that's what we have there. So that is effectively a cut down, user-friendly version of the Silmarillion. So I would recommend reading that. The Silmarillion itself is great. If you want the background to what happened, then yes, the first age, second age stuff, which is the bulk of what happened, is in the Silmarillion. The first age is there and absolutely essential. You might want to read, if you want to understand Numenor, in the Book of Unfinished Tales, there is a section on a description of Numenor, which is really interesting, which is probably worth it. In the Fourth Age section, there's 4 different bits there. Sorry, the Fourth Age section. The Second Age section, there are 4 different bits. One of them is a description of Numenor, which is well worth a read. One of them is a rundown of the kings and queens of Numenor. Again, really interesting. Not just a list, but like a bit of snippet about each of them. There's the Mariner's Wife, that story that I told you about earlier, and then there's also that breakdown of Galadriel and Killerborn, which allows you, I think it is well written actually. I like quoting that first bit, but afterwards you do get a feel for what the character of Galadriel that is there throughout these different changes. Even if we don't know exactly what she was up to at different points, the character does emerge quite clearly, I think. Billy B501 saying, it is speculated that $1 billion is to be spent on this series. Will they make their money back for a season 2? So I think they're committed to all 5 seasons, is the short answer. And I think money is really no object as far as they're concerned. They spent $250 million buying the rights. They spent another, I don't know, couple of $100 million on season 1 alone. I dread to think how much they're going to spend on publicity. If you think you're getting lots of stuff now about the Rings of Power, just wait. You will not be able to escape it. It will be on every crisp packet, every bus side, every advert break that you get on YouTube. It'll be everywhere. The Rings of Power is going to be all over the place. They're going to spend so much money on this. Will they get their money back? I think that Amazon, at the risk of going into sort of like how the different streaming services business models operate, Amazon have a different business model to Netflix or Disney or any of the other competitors. They will not count success purely on the basis of how many people are watching this, or even how many people subscribe, or how many people does this prevent from unsubscribing, because Amazon Prime is not just about a TV channel or a streaming service. This is about, can they draw people into this that turns Amazon Prime into more of a go-to streaming service to start with, in the same way that people naturally might flick to say, I wonder what's on Netflix to watch. Not many people currently flick to say, I wonder what's on Amazon Prime. They want to amend that, so people default start thinking about that. This is, a lot of people don't even think of Amazon Prime as being a proper streaming service. They might think, oh yeah, there are some things on there. So that's the first thing, is mindset change for people. Another thing, which is that Amazon is not just going to be making its money from this TV show and the subscriptions they get. It'll be, now you're on Amazon Prime, you can order some books. Now you're on Prime, you can be doing lots of other things there. This is about a bigger Amazon project. So their business model doesn't work the same as everyone else's. So don't stop and wonder, are they going to cancel it afterwards? They're going to do all 5 seasons of this. I am absolutely convinced of it. I didn't know as much about it a few months ago. Now I'm reasonably sure it's not going to bomb. That much I'm pretty sure of. It may well get some hate. It may well get some people who don't like it, but it's going to look spectacular at the very least. And so expect all 5 seasons. Again, Lob saying Silmarillion is even better than Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. So bleak and beautiful. Yeah, there's some heady wine in there. Let's put it there. Heady wine of literature. Laura Estrada saying, in Deep Geek, I'm just bugging over Anatar having a shaved head. No, half the beauty is in his hair, or the elves and their hair. I don't think that's Anatar. I don't think it is. So the picture, this one here, I don't think that's Anatar. It could be many things. Maybe it is, but I think this is some sort of priest or priestess of Morgoth. That's my best take at the moment. They didn't get any information. They just showed it, and then people said, "Oh, it looks like Sauron," and then they ran with it. So maybe it is. Maybe it is, but the two answers are it might not be, and if it is, don't assume that that's the Anatar form of Sauron. This is just a form that, if this is Sauron, a form that Sauron takes on. Reflective Rambling saying, I love how focused this channel can be on hair. The elves' hair is a thing. It's definitely a thing. Jasper L, really hope the Blue Wizards make an appearance and change the weather with their staffs. Do something epic. Really like your channel. Thanks. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so I hope that they should do. I think it's a missed opportunity. This is one of those things. I'll talk very briefly about rights, because the reason I don't talk about rights much is because nobody knows who's got the rights to things, and I say that genuinely. I have talked to people who you would think, if anyone knows who owns the rights to what, they will know, and they're a little bit uncertain. What we do know is that Amazon have the rights to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, including the appendices to The Lord of the Rings. They do not currently have the rights to the Silmarillion. I say currently. The showrunners, when asked about whether Amazon were going to be getting the rights to that, they were like very coy. So maybe they're trying to get them, who knows? But what that means is that at the moment they can't be talking about things that are just in the Silmarillion, but the Tolkien estate can give them special permissions, so maybe they can do some things. They just want to hold back because they can think they can make a bit more money out of this. If they say you can't do this because it's in the Silmarillion, do you want to pay us some more money and then you can do this? Why shouldn't they? So the rights are very complicated. There are also rights which are still with Warner Brothers New Line Cinema to be making film versions of stuff. So in 2024, we're going to have the War of the Rohirrim, which is a fantastic tale about the Rohirrim back in the earlier in the Third Age. What happens with Helm Hammerhand, and that's being made into an animated movie. So the rights are confusing and out there. Tolkien sold off a lot of rights during his lifetime, but some of them reverted back. Some of them he actually just sold forever rights because he thought, well, while I'm alive, I want to try and make some money for my family, which, again, you can say fair enough, might not have been the best business decision given the success that followed. But yes, there is the Saul Zemeckis company still randomly as a company own huge amounts of rights over Tolkien merchandising. As I say, it's a very complicated issue, and even people you think should understand it do not. Corey Blumberg saying, I love your content. Thank you very much. I love your optimism about the show as well, but I have to ask bluntly, at which point would you admit the show is bad? Do you need to see it in its entirety first? Cheers. Okay, well, I mean, this is a fair question. So, yes, I am optimistic, and I hope it's going to be good. And I hope it's going to be good for the reason why I think all Tolkien fans should hope it's going to be good. Because this is an amazing universe, and I hope that we get another amazing representation of it on screen. I don't understand people who want it to fail. If you're a Tolkien fan, I would hope that you want this to be amazing. The question about when I might say it's bad, I say a lot. I haven't seen it yet. What I have seen is exactly what you have all seen. At that London event, I saw 20 minutes of footage. A reasonable amount of that has now come out in trailers. There is some that I have seen that you haven't, but these were snippets. This wasn't like a bit of an episode. I'm a character and plot person. That's as it stands. I don't know yet about the character and plot. There are some things that I have some alarm bells about because I saw a character do a certain thing. Maybe that was a one-off. Maybe that's a core part of their personality in this show. I don't know. So I will wait and see. When might I mean, I guess a few episodes in, I might be able to say if I did think it was going bad at that point, I might say so. But I mean, I will give my honest opinion. I genuinely will give my honest opinion. I want this to be great. If it isn't great, I will happily accept it's not great. What I think is most likely, though, we often go to this kind of dichotomy of, is this going to be good or bad? What I think is most likely is it's going to be a bit of both. I think that there will be some things which look amazing. I defy any true Tolkien fan to look at the footage of the Two Trees of Valinor and not just go, wow. I think anyone looking, from what I've seen of Khazad-dûm in its height, I think that looks amazing. I think there are going to be things here that definitely look absolutely amazing. I think the music's going to be fantastic. What I've heard of the music is brilliant. There may well be bits that I don't like. So I think it's not likely that I will get to a point where I go, oh, this is all terrible. I might get to a point where I go, oh, I don't like what they've done here. I don't like that bit there. But I can still recognize that thing looks beautiful. If they take John Howe's, and John Howe is a legendary Tolkien artist, and he's the concept designer for a lot of the visuals. If they take his designs and put them on screen, it should look amazing. There's no reason why it shouldn't look amazing. So, yeah, I understand when you're saying, asking bluntly, at which point would you admit the show is bad? I don't tend to buy so much into the, is it good, is it bad? I think there will definitely be some good points, and I think there probably will be some bad points. And I will try and give as honest and nuanced an answer to that as and when I can. Question from Martin S. How do you think they will represent, or how will they present Valinor? Will they say how potent the Valar are? Because that might make the Númenóreans look foolish, despite their military might and not knowing Eru's action. I think it will be mostly off screen. We will see it a little bit in flashback or prologue. I tend to the view that we will not actually see the Valar. That's where I think we're going to be at. I think our view is going to stay on Middle-earth Númenor. We're not actually going to see the Valar themselves. we will see messengers and emissaries of the Valar in Numenor's last days. Then we certainly got the Eagles were kind of coming across and basically giving messages from the Valar. We do get that kind of thing going on, but I think that's going to largely be off screen. So what will be interesting is the fact that Numenor in the books, nobody doubts that the Valar are there. Nobody doubts that the Valar are powerful. It's the fact that the Numenorians are persuaded to think that they don't care about humanity, which I think is understandable where they're coming from. It looks like they don't. The elves arrive and they say, "Come, join us in Valinor. Come, stay over here. Elves live forever. This is fantastic. You can be in the Undying Lands. How wonderful. Come here." Humans, no, you're not allowed. Humans, you're only going to live for a little while. That's it. Then you die. And, elves, if they die, they come back. No, that's not. You understand where this can come from in that fantasy world. But I don't think they need to show the Valar in a kind of a personal level. And that, I think, will help our suspension of disbelief about why they think that this might be a good idea to attack them, because if you see these godlike beings going and doing godlike things, then why on earth would you do that? That looks deluded. But if you don't actually see them, if you just kind of hear rumors and they just feel like gods, they feel like people who've got hiding behind these great high mountain ranges, then yeah, why not? 6YT saying, who do you personally think or hope the Meteor Man is? Personally, I think it's Gandalf, because if I remember correctly, he arrives close to this time, and as the halflings find and help him, I hope it is. Gandalf arrives around the year 1000 of the Third Age, so he doesn't arrive yet. He's not here in the Second Age. Could it be him? As I said earlier, it's possible. I don't think it's ever said anywhere. Gandalf never went there in the Second Age. I don't think it's ever written down clearly. He never went there in the Second Age. So he could do. Personally, I don't think so, and I hope not. Because for me, that would be putting him somewhere that we don't think he was, and he clearly would have had an impact, and we've not seen any impact from him in anything that Tolkien wrote, so it would seem to be a little bit weird for him not to be there. In terms of who do I think Meteor Man should be, I don't know. I would be okay with it being a blue wizard, because it is an old man arriving clearly from sort of space, another dimension or something. I would be okay with that. There are various other ideas out there that I've heard. I'd also be okay with it being a completely new character, but I think they have to be a Maiar or something along those lines, because otherwise it would just be really disappointing. I mean, I struggle with Meteor Man. I have to admit, I struggle with Meteor Man, because the moment you have somebody coming to Earth in a meteor that crashes into the ground, that character is important in your story. And Tolkien did not write about a character coming in a meteor in the Second Age, coming and crashing into the ground, and that being an important person. So this is somebody who is going to be important that Tolkien did not write about, which makes me feel a little bit nervous. My first instinct was that they were going to make this Sauron, but I think they're probably now not, because I think that's a little bit too obvious. So I don't think I have any hopes for this. This is a weird place to be in. I have a few fears of things it couldn't be. And I guess this is one of those things where I have to trust them that it's going to be okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's not a thing I'm particularly excited about. Someone I saw in the chat asking, has Rings of Power killed the Wheel of Time? No, absolutely not. The Wheel of Time, they are filming, perhaps have finished filming season 2. Actually, they have. I heard that they had finished filming season 2. I have a feeling that will probably go live Novemberish, based on roughly how long it'll take them to do post-production, and also it makes sense they might want to follow on from the Rings of Power with Wheel of Time. They have already commissioned season 3, so it's fair to say whenever you read anything from Amazon about the Wheel of Time, we might think this didn't have as huge an impact as maybe we thought they wanted, but for them, this was their biggest new TV show ever, apparently. And this was I think I'm right in saying this was the biggest new streaming TV show of the year, which you have to take a step back and get, okay, so that's not up against The Witcher or anything like that, or The Mandalorian, because they're not new shows, but up against Marvel did a lot of things in that year. There were a few Star Wars things in that year. This was a big hit, and just maybe not as big as we might have been thinking, so it's not killed it, and it's still going. We've got at least 2 more seasons of that to go. Reflective Rambling, picking up from Matthew Stewart, thank you very much, saying, how much of the other lands do you think we will see? East of Middle-earth, Rhûn or Harad? Yes, so I think we will see Harad, the village that we get Bronwyn in Elrond in is Arondir? Sorry, Arondir in is called in Tir-Harad, which, so that is Harad, so south and east of Mordor. Will we see further? They've promised us we will. Maybe not in season 1. Maybe it's going to be season 2 or 3 that they're expanding the scope. They say, every TV show says this, but they say this is just the start. Further seasons are going to get bigger and the canvas is going to get wider. So maybe later on, I think we will see things happening further afield in the east. So yes, I'd love to see Rhûn. The Sea of Rhûn is one of those places you see it on a map. It's massive, but we never really find out much about what's going on there. So I think we will see more. A bit of it this time. That village is going to be in Harad, but a lot more in later seasons. Corey Bloomberg, thank you, saying thank you for your honesty. I myself find this is picking up on the question about if or when I might conclude that it's bad. I myself find much more enjoyment from content on channels like yours than I do from any content Amazon has made available at the moment, but I guess I'm just a purist. Keep it up. Well, thank you very much. This last trailer, the one that I was talking through, was the first, and the reason why I decided to do a long talk through that rather than just sort of a small trailer breakdown, because I was starting to get a little bit jaded. Don't tell Amazon, but I was starting to get a little bit jaded by there was teaser trailer. They did a teaser for the teaser trailer to the main trailer. That's just a bit too much for me. I was starting to get a bit jaded. And so I was just going to do a quick breakdown of this. But this was the first time, having seen a trailer, I felt that I understood what they were trying to do with this TV show, which was what I was trying to convey to you in the first however long hour or so of this live stream. A feel for what this is about, what the overarching story might be about. So that's why I did what I did for the beginning of this stream, but it's also it's been reassuring for me, because I don't, mean, this is a low bar, but I didn't hate it. Let's put it that way. There are things I'm still concerned about, but some of it I thought looked great, and some of it I was willing to give a go. Yeah, it's being a purist is fine as far as Tolkien's concerned. We do have to keep in mind Tolkien himself was happy for people. He said it a couple of times. He liked the idea of him creating the overall structure and then other people creating stories within that. This is doing what Tolkien was wanting people to do. That doesn't mean it's going to be good, but it does mean that we shouldn't in principle hate it for what it's trying to do. We should judge it on the merits of what it is when we see it. In terms of just I don't know whether you meant it in this way or not, but in terms of what Amazon has done in the past, Amazon's history of creating TV shows, I think they're getting better at it. There have been 2 TV shows in the last couple of years that I've actually found myself really liking, being The Boys, which if you've not watched it, it sounds like nothing desperately new. It's superhero stuff, but hey, not all of the superheroes are heroic. It's just very good, though. And also Good Omens, which I really enjoyed. So I think they're getting better at it. Let's go to question from one of my patrons. So George R.R. Tolkien saying, salutations, Robert, and salutations back to you. 3 weeks away from Hot D's release, House of the Dragon. Cannot wait for it. I can't stop thinking if they're going to be choosing a whole new intro or if they'll keep the classic Game of Thrones theme. Yeah, just briefly on that. I want to keep this focused on Lord of the Rings, but just briefly on that. I'm also really looking forward to it. I'm going to be covering House of the Dragon in full if you're into that. So that means episode breakdowns. That means issues that come up. I'll try and do mini trailer breakdowns as well. Live streams. I'll be doing a lot on House of the Dragon and then also a lot on Rings of Power. So I'm probably going to run myself into the ground over the course of like a couple of months or so. But I'm really looking forward to it. This is heaven for me. I mean, I love both of these worlds. And if these are 2 good shows, then wow, I'm very excited. But in terms of the Game of Thrones theme, I don't know. They've got the same composer. I've not heard anything about the theme. My feeling is it's going to be different, though, to keep it separate. They will probably carry over some sort of Game of Thronesy feel to it, but I think that they want a different look to it. Let's you carry on. Well, sorry, I just noticed. I was wondering if you had any details on the character named Halbrand. I know everyone suspects he is the Witch King of Angmar, but could he possibly be Sauron? We have touched on this a little bit ago. He seems like he will be a strong driving point in the show, so I'm curious. I just finished listening to your audio narration of Alice Through the Looking Glass. Your presentation is superb. Thank you. That's my second channel. If you like audiobooks, then I narrate audiobooks, basically classic science fiction and fantasy. My second channel is The Well Told Tale. If you're watching this back later, there will be a link down in the description. If you're watching this live, then wherever the chat is, there will be a link in there. Thank you, moderators. Quick pause to thank my patrons. Patrons, thank you. This is why I prioritize your questions for these live streams, because you support me in allowing me to do what I do. So thank you so much. If you do wish to support this channel, that is the best way to do it. Again, there will be a link down there or wherever the live chat is. I'll talk a little bit more very briefly about Halbrand. Let's see whether I can get that picture back of him so we all know who we're talking about. Halbrand is a fascinating character because he's been introduced as a main character. He's a new character. We've been told he's trying to escape his past. We know the beginning bit of what happens, but that's it. Nothing we've seen from the trailers, nothing we've seen from the interviews gives us any information about what happens after this point that we've got here, really. We know he's escaping from the Southlands, wants to have a new fate. He's out on the high seas. He rescues Galadriel on that raft, or she rescues him, one way or the other. The two of them end up on Numenor. We know what she heads off and does after that, but he appears here looking chiseled and ruggedly handsome, and that seems to be all we know about him. The implication is that he stays there on Numenor. Might he therefore become someone like the Witch King? It's entirely possible. Might he be aspect of trying to figure out his enemies? It's entirely possible, but he is a mystery. This is, for me, this is as big, I mean, unless they give us a little bit more information about him later, for me, they are keeping this as big a mystery as the who is Meteor Man, who is Sauron kind of thing, because they're not giving us information on him. They're building him up as being a big and new character who's going to be important, but they're not giving us the information on who he is and what he's going to be doing. Refresh remembering saying self-care, please keep yourself well. Thank you. I will be doing, don't you worry about that. I've done TV show series before on this channel when I was doing Game of Thrones season 8 and the like. So yes, I'm definitely going to be looking after myself too. Kenneth Noisewater saying, can I ask about Tom Bombadil? Of course you can ask about Tom Bombadil. I love hearing people talking about Tom Bombadil and asking, because he's such an enigma. Let's go. Laura Estrada saying, I'm still bummed about The Dark Crystal being cancelled on Netflix. Has it? I didn't know that. I didn't watch it, but I know some people who were big fans of it. So yeah, that's a shame. George R. R. Martin saying, can we get sexy Sauron? Mara Lee saying, I know this would have to be a guess, but how do you think we'll be introduced to him as a werewolf, as some other type of beast, as sexy Sauron? So sexy Sauron, for those who are unaware of this phrase, this is Sauron in the Second Age. So Tolkien describes Anatar, which is this form that he takes on to with which he uses to be seducing Celebrimbor into making the Rings of Power. And Tolkien says that he is of fair hue, which is a Tolkien way of saying, yeah, he's good looking. So he's that has been shortened within the fandom to sexy Sauron. I've met, I don't know how many people who've claimed the credit for being the first person to come up with this. It feels like the kind of thing that lots of people probably came up with independently and then realized that other people were also talking about it independently. Sexy Sauron will happen. We will see Sauron with fair hue in season 2. We may well see that in season 1 as well. Now, once we get to season 2, once we get somebody knocking on Celebrimbor's door and saying, hey, do you fancy making some rings with me? That's the point at which we will definitely know who Sauron is. I wonder whether we'll get a reveal at the end of season 1 who Sauron is. They may keep that secret or try to keep that secret all the way through to season 2. But when we get to season 2, yes, we're going to have sexy Sauron. And it may be that we get to look back on season 1 and go, so that was sexy Sauron there. Gypsy Snickerdoodle saying, as long as it isn't sparkly Sauron. No, I don't think we're going to get sparkly Sauron. Kenneth Noisewater saying, question on Tom Bombadil. Do you believe he is Tolkien's embodiment of the Logos Christ-like figure he aspired the ideal man to be? Personally, we have to start from where Tolkien comes from on this, which is that he says he doesn't entirely understand, or he didn't entirely understand exactly or couldn't explain why Tom Bombadil was important, but he just knew that he was important enough to be included in the story, which means that he did not come up with a pithy one line of what Tom Bombadil is, which is why I always ask when I have Tolkien guests on this channel, I always ask them who or what do you think Tom Bombadil is, and every single person's got a slightly different idea, and that's because Tolkien didn't nail it down. Could he be Tolkien's embodiment of the idealized human, the Christ-like figure? There may well be an element of that in there. That could well be part of what it is. I think that there's another element of it is definitely the music. I love this idea of him being sort of like an echo of the music of the Ainur, a representation of Middle Earth. He's not just an allegorical figure or anything like that. He's also he's intimately connected to Middle Earth as a place. He was the first and he will be the last. He is part and connection to Middle Earth. So there's a lot going on there. I have done a couple of videos. If you're interested in my view on Tom Bombadil, I have done a couple of videos. Do go and check them out. Just on the Sauron point, Marley saying, I think I read somewhere that it was going to be Joseph Maul who played Benjen Stark, who was going to play Sauron. What do you think? Yeah, so he is this character called Adar. When he was first announced as being part of the cast, then the code name for the character he was given was Oren, which still occasionally appears in articles about him. And we weren't quite sure at the time. He does have, I mean, if you think of Benjen Stark from Game of Thrones, he does have a very kind of, and I say this in the nicest possible way, diabolic face. It's very kind of angular and deep set eyes and sharp dark eyebrows that you could make quite demonic if you wished to. So I think given his look and given his given the fact that he clearly was playing a bad guy, a lot of people jumped to the conclusion, I think, that he was going to be Sauron. I think it's now looking likely that he won't. He is going to be this leader of the orcs, the person bringing together an orc army, sort of in preparation for Sauron. I think that's going to be his role. So I think that he is gathering together because at some point Sauron will need to repair to Mordor. Having got Celebrimbor making rings, he will then need to return or head to Mordor, where he will forge the Ring of Power. That will, by the point he gets there, Mordor will need to be his home base, even if he's not been there before. So I think we will see Adar as being part of this, building up his orc army for him while he's off making rings up in Eregion and getting Mordor ready for him. I think that's where his role, rather than being Sauron himself. Sauron in fair hue in season 2. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Cory Blumberg saying, thank you very much, very generous of you, by the way, saying, lastly, I am working on a Durin the Deathless cosplay for Tolkien Day. Aside from a crown of stars above his head, how do you suggest I best represent him to Tolkien fans and casual people I meet? Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, so he is. So for those who are thinking of Durin the Deathless, what's it? So Durin, I think I mentioned this slightly higher up in the live stream. Durin to Durin's folk, the Longbeards, they think that Durin the Deathless is that he doesn't die. They had their first Durin, and then he kind of gets reincarnated as another Durin, and then reincarnated as another Durin. How would you represent that? Well, what we know is the Longbeard. That's the name of those people. So he will have to have a long beard, in my view, for that to work, because he is the representation of his people. He is based in Khazad-dûm. And so I would personally also, I think I would include a mithril element to this. That is a Khazad-dûm thing, so I would think it's there. I mean, if you're doing cosplay and you want to go crazy with it, then you might wish to include a Durin's Bane reference as well, because obviously Durin the Sixth was kicked out from Khazad-dûm by the Balrog. Matthew Stewart saying beard tucked into the belt. Long beard is a must. I'm just going through the chat. There's always people in the chat who've got better ideas than me. W saying, I always envisioned you wearing a suit and having spectacles like some type of esteemed English professor at Oxford. Well, I am wearing spectacles. I tend not to wear a suit. It tends to be, in my time, this is quite late at night, so it's far too late to be wearing a suit for this kind of thing. But obviously in day wear, I wear a suit all the time. Let's go to... Actually, I'm coming towards the end of my questions for my patrons. I've got one more question for my patrons. So now's a good time to drop some more questions in the chat. I'll try and answer as many of those questions as I can. Kevin Blockschwenk saying, any news or hints as to whether there will be Ents or Entwives in the show? Yes, this is a question I've been looking forward to answering. There are hints. Just hints, but they are definitely there. The first was there was an advert that they did, which I didn't really care for it, so I didn't retweet it or anything, but it was a real world thing about it's quite inspirational in its way about a kid who's learning to be himself. He gets the Lord of the Rings book, he reads the book, he becomes a cosplayer, and then he goes to some con or something and meets his people, and that was great. But partway through that, an Ent appeared at the window. Now, that was important because that showed that Amazon, who made this, clearly felt that they had the rights and ability to have Ents, so they can do Ents. The second hint that we've got was in the trailer that I just showed. We had Alandir, who was there, and I said some hands grabbed him back. To me, they looked Ent-like hands. It's very hard to see. It's very dark, but that's possible. The third thing is that in whichever teaser trailer we had where everybody was gazing at the sky and looking at that comet, we had about a second from a forest, and there were definitely Ents there. We just saw them from afar. We've not been introduced to them as characters, but there was also what looked like an Entling, so a baby Ent. Might we see Entwives? Yes. So the Entwave, we may in this TV show get an answer, a show only answer, of course, as to what happened to the Entwives. Tolkien did speculate on this. I did a whole video on this. Where did the Entwives go? And I think, actually, at the risk of spoiling that video, my take is that actually to Tolkien the important point was that they were gone. And he wanted a world which was rounded and full and real. And in his world, there was a lot of loss. People he cared about hugely had gone. He lost his father when he was very, very young. He lost his mother while he was still, I think, a teenager. He went to war. All of his close friends, with the exception of like one or two, were killed. He had loss in his life, and I think that reached an expression through what happens with the Ents, is that this feeling of loss. They've gone. I don't know where they are. And they're not coming back, is there. And I think that was a key part of Tolkien, of who he was, and he wanted that in his world. So I think the important point in literary terms is the fact that they are gone, and us speculating where they might have gone is actually slightly missing the point. But he did, in a letter, start to speculate about what might in-world have happened to them. And the answer is basically they may well have headed down sort of south and east of Fangorn. There's an area just outside Mordor where we know that they were at some point, and when Sauron was retreating back there in one of the wars of the Second Age, that we will almost certainly see, he just destroyed that land. And so the Entwives were probably destroyed by Sauron in the Second Age, so we will probably see it. Jason Keane saying, I thought the Entwives moved to the Shire. Well, Treebeard asks if they're there. And there is a tale of trees moving there. So it's possible, but we don't ever see them. Spielkalb von Sparta saying, on a panel, the showrunners were asked if we'll see Entwives, and they answered, you've probably seen them. Well, I didn't know that before. That's a new quote from me, but that probably hints that's who we saw in that second of looking at Ents looking at the sky at the comet going. Reflective Rambling saying, what seems to be an unpopular opinion, I'm excited for the original characters. I want to see how they can flesh out the world. I'm hoping I love certain characters as much as I hope I do. Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to new characters too. I think we shouldn't be afraid of the new characters. I mean, in many ways, I'm more nervous about the characters that I know and love. Which is always the way. I'm nervous about the House of the Dragon characters as well. I think they're going to do a great job in House of the Dragon. I'm hoping they're going to do a great job here. But the new characters, I mean, if I don't love them, then that's not as much of an issue as if I don't love Elrond, because Elrond's amazing. So I hope I love, and I'm sure I will, from what I've seen from Robert Arameo's performance. He looks good, so I'm sure I will love it. But yeah, so I'm excited. Martin S, thank you very much. Very kind super chat saying, which races beside men could have been turned into ring wraiths with the Ring of Power when Sauron had his master ring? It seems dwarfs could not, and I assume Ainur could not either, but elves with rings still on, hobbits. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So we're not told all of the details. Hobbits definitely could. Hobbits seem to have descended from humanity at some point. Humans definitely could. The elves, the three elves that the ring that they had, that we know about, the Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf ones, they were made just by Celebrimbor, so they didn't have Sauron's input there, so they were slightly different. So could they have corrupted? I think I'm going down the route that Galadriel could have been corrupted by the One Ring, or otherwise that whole temptation scene in The Lord of the Rings is pretty meaningless. If she could have been corrupted by the One Ring, then I think that implies that elves could be corrupted by ring magic. So I'm going to say yes, theoretically they could. It would depend on the elf, though. With dwarves, it did have an impact on them, but what it did was it just made them dig deeper and more greedily. So what it seems to do is it seems to make you, the Rings of Power seem to tap into your idea of power, your idea of greatness, and then greatly amplify that. And so this is why when you get Gollum has the One Ring for over half a millennium, and he was a simple person. He was basically a hobbit. And so his ideas of power were just being able to get what food he wanted, being able to kill orcs if he ever needed to, that kind of thing. His power was just in his own little realm. So the dwarves, what does power mean to the dwarves? Well, digging deeper, getting greater, more gold, a bigger pile of beautiful things, crafting better gems, that kind of thing. So that's what happened to the dwarves. With the elves, Peter Jackson did present the elves as generally quite pure and otherworldly, which they are in a way, but when you read Tolkien, when you read the Silmarillion, you'll find that there are as many power-hungry elves as there are power-hungry humans. So if you gave it to the right elf, then yes, I think they probably could have been brought under its power. Ollie saying, instead of a dark lord, you will have a queen, not dark and beautiful, but terrible as the dawn, treacherous as the sea, stronger than the foundations of the earth. Yeah, fantastic speech. I love it. Just quickly flicking back. Devilman saying, I swear Sauron was confirmed to not be in the trailer. I wouldn't believe anything they say about Sauron, to be honest. Jansen Baker saying, I believe Halbrand will become a member of the faithful in the end. He is the one that wears the red fish scale armor with the horse sword. Okay, yeah, perhaps. I don't. I mean, yes, he is, but that I don't think that necessarily tells us where he's going to end up. This is a 5-season arc, so maybe he'll end up in a good place at the end of season 1. I don't think that guarantees he'll be in the same place at the end of season 5. That's lots of Ent love, which is good, and also dwarf love as well. One of the things that I personally have loved about the response, the fan response to the Rings of Power is quite how much people have sort of rallied around the dwarves. This chance to actually see the dwarves at the height of their power. It's been great, because the dwarves for a very long time have not been treated well by the films, and they're not treated very well by the books. Seems a bit unfair to say it that way, but the Silmarillion is very clearly written from the elves' perspective, and so the dwarves don't get as much of a look in. So I'm loving the way that fans are rallying behind the dwarves. Geodesic Interpolation, thank you very much for the super sticker a little while ago. Didn't spot that one when it was coming through first. Martin S saying, good answer, but I meant becoming ring wraith specifically, not greedy or corrupted in general. Oh, right. Okay, that's fair. So who could they all become ring wraiths specifically? I mean, I think it really depends on the person. The fact that he made them specifically for elves, that was the original plan, to give them to elves. The distributing them to the 9, the 7, and the 3, that came later. The original plan was for this to go to the elves, because the elves were the big enemy as far as he's concerned. So he clearly thought they would. He clearly thought that would be what would happen. But he got it wrong with the dwarves, clearly, and it did happen with the humans. So in his mind, yes, is the answer. It could have happened with elves. It would depend on the specific elf, but it could definitely happen like that. Okay, I think with that, I'm going to start drawing this one to a close. I will be back next week. Haven't decided yet whether to do Lord of the Rings or House of the Dragon. Maybe I'll do another House of the Dragon one. We're getting very close to House of the Dragon. It's August the 21st, so we're only talking, 3 weeks away, 3 and a bit weeks away. So it's, that's getting very close. So maybe I'll do a few House of the Dragon ones coming up. If you're interested in what videos are coming up, I've got one coming out tomorrow answering the question that maybe you never knew that you had in your mind. I've asked this a lot of people, and which are the 2 towers in the title of the 2 towers? And a lot of people just get this kind of look, I think I know, but it's actually a more complicated question than you think, because the answer in the films is not necessarily the answer that is in the books, and Tolkien, in true Tolkien style, actually changed his mind a few times on this one. So if you think you know, or you wish you knew which the two towers are in the Two Towers, then check out the video that's coming out tomorrow. If you are watching this back a little bit later, let me appear full screen again. If you're watching this back a little bit later, then appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. That is all for this time. Take care, everyone. Thank you, moderators. Amazing work, as always. Excellent questions. Thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you again next time.